The surging number of coronavirus cases in the U.S. is causing a renewed strain on the nation's economy. According to the Labor Department, an additional 885,000 Americans filed for first-time unemployment last week. That is up 23,000 claims from the previous week. It's also the second straight week the U.S. has seen a rise in new jobless claims. The U.S. has now confirmed more than 17 million cases of coronavirus nationwide. This unfortunate milestone comes as Congress inches closer to agreeing on terms for a possible coronavirus relief package. But as cities and states across the country begin to lock down and enforce additional coronavirus restrictions, experts are concerned about the impact that could have on the economy in the coming months. Lori Bettinger joins me now from Washington, D.C. She is the president of BancAlliance and the former director of the Troubled Asset Relief Program during the Obama administration. Lori, welcome. Great to have you with us. So we have now seen the number of first-time unemployment claims increase for 2 consecutive weeks. What exactly is driving these numbers, and what does this latest snapshot mean for the current state of the U.S. economy?
You know, unfortunately, I think this hasn't come as a surprise to many people who've been, watching the economy and in particular what's been happening with the coronavirus levels throughout the country, as you just noted. We saw that, we definitely saw improvement over the summer, some into the fall, but the numbers still felt high. Even when you were talking about 700,000 new claims, that's still a lot of people being impacted. And now, our second week of increases, I wish I could say that I thought this was it and we were going to level out here, but I don't think that's the case. I think in communities across the country, certainly in mine here where I am in Washington, D.C., you just get notice day after day of restaurants, bars, entertainment venues closing down. Many hope that it's just going to be until the weather warms up, but people admit they don't know when. And you're also starting to see small businesses for whom, this should really be one of the strong parts of their seasons. And they're just not seeing, the traction and sales they usually do. So I think in these sectors that we've talked about that are just so impacted, hospitality, travel, entertainment, they are such big drivers of the economy and they employ so many people. And as they are either continuing to not be able to rehire employees or laying off employees that perhaps were rehired this summer, I think we're just going to continue to see unemployment numbers on a gradual move back up.
We did see stocks rally a little bit on the news that it seems like Congress is inching closer to a coronavirus deal. So on the one hand, you have that, which seems positive, and you have the vaccine, which is positive news. But at the same time, we're seeing more cities and states across the country enacting these tighter lockdown restrictions, as we've been discussing. So are those things enough to balance each other out when it comes to the outlook on the economy? I know we've discussed this before, that the market is not, Main Street, but in some ways, it's tied together, obviously. So can those two things balance each other out, the good news on the one hand and the bad news on the other?
Maybe in the long term, but at the same time, I think, the stock market is clearly showing, to your point, it's showing an expectation for a strong recovery, whether it's late Q2, early Q3, as we start to see sort of the ordinary members of the public get vaccinated. But I don't think that has any impact on you today. If you're unemployed, you're looking at the termination of your benefits at the end of the year. You're looking at the moratorium on evictions being lifted. If you have student debt, you're looking on those payments, that start to come back. So to look at the stock market and say, oh, I think things are going great or they're going to be great. I think if you're in one segment of the economy, that's absolutely true. But if you are someone living in a more paycheck to paycheck world, that, what happens in June or July doesn't help you today when you're talking about food insecurity, where you're going to live next month, how you're going to potentially buy presents for your family over the holidays. I don't think you care what the stock market's doing.
Absolutely. And we have seen, food insecurity rise across the country. All right, so let's talk about this possible coronavirus stimulus package. After months of inaction, it looks like lawmakers are getting closer to agreeing on terms for a $900 billion coronavirus stimulus deal. The most recent proposal includes a $600 stimulus check for most Americans. So realistically, though, when we're talking about those Americans that you've just described, who, the restaurant may be closing down for the last time this time around, or the dance studio that they've struggled to keep open is finally closing down, whatever that may be, at this point, is this late help enough to actually help the average American? And how big of an impact would a $600 check have on the overall economy?
That's a good question. And I firmly believe that something beats nothing. So I want to be very clear about that. And, every little bit helps. So, if the $600 to $700, I think that helps. Do I think it's enough? No. It's less than people got early on in the spring, when I would argue, to the extent that people had at least some savings to rely on. In many cases, those savings are no longer there. So many American families are in a worse off condition now, and we're giving them less money. So do I think it will help? Yes. Do I think it's sufficient? No. And, one of the things we saw this spring was when we gave direct stimulus payments, those were often spent in the economy. So you saw, consumer spending pick back up. Those payments go directly through to the economy. Maybe people are making their purchases at small businesses, restarting a few lessons at a studio that's just closed. And so I think, to the extent you look at a slightly larger direct payment, you also have economic benefits right there. And, you can also potentially help small businesses, who I know are being targeted by a different part of the proposed stimulus. But, again, something beats nothing, and I'm so glad to see this hopefully getting over the finish line in the next day or two. I think it's absolutely crucial, but it feels unfortunate that it's going to be so much less than we got in the spring, which many people argued wasn't enough at that point in time either.
Right. And speaking of not enough, a recent analysis has determined that nearly 8 million Americans have fallen into poverty over the last 5 months of the coronavirus pandemic. And in addition, more than 20 million Americans are currently enrolled in some form of unemployment. So how imperative is it for Congress to come to terms on this stimulus package before they head into their holiday recess this weekend? Because you and I are discussing it as if it's a done deal, but it isn't quite yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it is so imperative. I can't imagine not having anything in place at the end of the year, when so many of the benefits that are there go away, when all of a sudden evictions can begin. I don't know how you can look at what could happen to our country and not want to do whatever's in your power to remedy that. And, especially going into the holiday season, to not want to give so many Americans that have been impacted some degree of certainty that, they're still going to be able to hang on and make it to the other side of this recession. I just think it's absolutely crucial. But I agree with you.
Right,
it still has to get across the finish line.
Right. We're close. We're almost there.
Close.
All right. Well, Lori
Fingers
Bettinger,
crossed.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.